Chapter 41, Kai Vu Village, the Manuscript. Damn it. How can it be Alice? The moment he saw the human head inside the jar, Eric Church felt as though an invisible hand had seized his heart and was crushing it mercilessly. He simply could not accept that the head floating in the glass jar before them belonged to Alice Englert. The feeling was impossible to describe. Alice Englert was a veteran, someone who had survived countless blood gates, carrying more than a few life-saving traces of ghostly power. If even she had failed to deal with the spirit medium, then what chance did the rest of them have? The two men carefully examined the head inside the jar. As unbelievable as it was, they had no choice but to accept the truth. The head truly was Alice Englert's. Her beautiful face was slightly pale. Those eyes that usually held a lazy, indifferent charm were now frighteningly hollow. Chris Hemsworth carefully inspected the neck. The cut was clean and level, as if made by something incredibly sharp. Yet along the edge of the wound clung a pitch-black substance, its nature unknown. Under normal circumstances, anyone who had been decapitated would be unquestionably dead. And yet, somehow, the spirit medium had used some unfathomable method to keep Alice Englert alive. Holding the jar in his hands, Chris Hemsworth switched off the light. The room plunged back into darkness. The whispers gradually faded away. Carrying the jar out of the storage room, Chris Hemsworth spoke softly to Alice Englert's head. "Sister Alice, can you hear me? How are you right now?" After about 3 seconds of silence, the head replied. "What time is it now?" Chris Hemsworth told her the time. He couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration. This woman was extraordinary, absolutely not some fragile ornament. Even in such a state, she remained calm and clear-headed. "That's good, it's not as though she had just exhaled in relief. Listen carefully. We don't have much time left. Everything I say next, you must remember it." Chris Hemsworth nodded. "Go on, Sister Alice." She fell silent again, as if even speaking cost her tremendous effort. "There's something wrong with the spirit medium's body. It seems she's been suppressing the village's ghosts for too long using forbidden arts, and now she's suffering backlash. Under her bed, there's a hidden mechanism. Open it, and you'll find a secret compartment. Inside is a very important book. It records the truth of what happened in this village years ago, and the safe way to reach the mountain shrine. You must get it. And remember, under no circumstances should you confront the spirit medium head-on. You're not her match." Chris Hemsworth hurriedly asked. "Is there any way to save you?" Alice Englert did not answer. In her condition, she likely no longer had the strength to show any emotion. "If you can find my body before dawn and bring it back here, I can survive. My body is at the mountain shrine, behind the mountain." Chris Hemsworth answered without hesitation. "Understood." He was about to place the jar back where it had been when Alice Englert's soft voice sounded again. "Oh, there are many corpses in the mountain shrine. It might be hard to find mine." Chris Hemsworth froze, then heard her continue. "On my left buttock, there's a birthmark shaped like a dagger. It's easy to recognize." Hearing the faint embarrassment in her voice, Chris Hemsworth let out a quiet chuckle. After all, when it came to life and death, such things hardly mattered anymore. He put the jar back in its original place and checked carefully, making sure no trace had been left behind, before retreating cautiously. Eric Church nodded. "Lock the door." Not only did he lock it, he even restored the lock to look exactly as it had before. "Chris, what did Sister Alice say to you just now?" Chris Hemsworth was silent for a moment, then shook his head. The matter of the birthmark was better left unsaid. After all, Alice Englert was still a woman. "Let's get to the spirit medium's bedroom and find that book." The two of them entered the spirit medium's bedroom once more. They had been here before, but never imagined the spirit medium would be so cautious, designing a mechanism even in her own sleeping quarters. Guided by Alice Englert's instructions, they quickly located the mechanism beneath the bed. With a gentle twist, a hidden compartment slid open. Just as she had said, inside lay an old book. The cover was yellowed with age. Though carefully preserved, it bore unmistakable traces of time, corners worn, pages torn from being flipped through countless times. Chris Hemsworth didn't hesitate. He took the book and closed the compartment. Once done, the two immediately left the spirit medium's bedroom and stepped into the courtyard. But just as they were about to leave, the courtyard gate slowly creaked open. A familiar, aged, deeply wrinkled face appeared before them. Both sides froze the instant they came face to face. The air turned suffocatingly tense. Especially when the spirit medium's gaze fell upon the book, her most carefully hidden secret, now clutched in Chris Hemsworth's hands. After a brief silence, Chris Hemsworth turned and bolted toward the arched side gate. "Beard, run, now!" With a furious shout, both men sprinted toward the side passage. The spirit medium's face twisted with rage. Letting out a feral roar, she slammed her staff against the ground and gave chase. Chapter 42, Kai Vu Village, The Pursuit. "Damn it, we're seriously cursed." Eric Church spat furiously. That old hag could have come back early or late, but no, she had to return right when we were about to leave. Chris Hemsworth didn't reply. In his mind, the layout of the spirit medium's compound surfaced immediately. They had already searched the place once before. Chris Hemsworth had memorized the basic entrances and exits of the compound. The surrounding walls were too high, their tops embedded with sharp shards of glass. There was no way to climb out. Facing the spirit medium head-on was equally impossible. The only option left was to circle around. Fortunately, the spirit medium lived alone. Normally, no villagers ever came here. She was effectively isolated. "Damn it, hey, bro, look." Eric Church glanced back and his whole body shuddered. The spirit medium, who usually walked with a wobble, was now chasing them at terrifying speed. She had discarded the dragon-headed staff. Her face was twisted with ferocity, and in her eyes flickered an indescribable craving. Her running posture grew more and more contorted, more and more grotesque. "You dare, sneak into my home. I'll skin you alive, strip your bones, pry open your skulls and pour boiling oil inside." She roared madly. Running behind Chris Hemsworth, Eric Church felt his bladder tighten, cold sweat pouring down his forehead. He knew the spirit medium was absolutely not bluffing. From what they had seen at Phuong Thon Hall and the Bat Hack Well, she was fully capable of doing exactly that. Damn it, why is she getting faster the longer she runs? After great effort, they finally followed Chris Hemsworth around the compound to the main gate, only to discover it had been locked from the inside. The medium was suspicious by nature. She had anticipated the possibility of intruders and had deliberately left herself an extra layer of protection. The main gate was secured with an old-style lock reinforced by a thick iron chain, tightly binding the doorframe. "Hurry, Beard, open it." Seeing the spirit medium appear at the far end of the curved passage, Chris Hemsworth's heart pounded violently, each beat like a bronze bell, threatening to burst straight out of his throat. The moment Eric Church saw the lock, he didn't hesitate. He pulled out a steel wire and immediately began prying it open. At the same time, the terrifying figure of the spirit medium drew ever closer. Both men could already smell the nauseating stench clinging to her body in the air. "I treated you kindly, and yet you ungrateful wretches not only refuse to appreciate it, you dare steal from my home. If you like my place so much, then stay here forever." With Chris Hemsworth blocking her line of sight, the spirit medium couldn't see Eric Church working on the lock behind him. She assumed the two had given up resisting and were standing there, waiting to die. And in the spirit medium's hand, at some unknown moment, a strange object appeared. A pale white bone blade. Dark, unidentified residue clung to the edge of the blade, slightly sticky, revolting to look at. The instant Chris Hemsworth saw it, he thought of the black substance on Alice Englert's neck. He was almost certain. She had been decapitated by this very bone blade. As the spirit medium closed in step by step, the sound of the lock snapping finally rang out from behind. The next instant, Eric Church let out a sharp shout, gathered his strength, and kicked the door open with a single blow. Bang! Chris Hemsworth burst out first. There was no time for manners anymore. The two survival came first. Behind them came the spirit medium's furious howls. She clearly hadn't expected one of them to be a skilled lockpicker. But perhaps because the book in Chris Hemsworth's hands was simply too important, she didn't give up. She continued to chase them like a lunatic. Damn it! This old hag runs so fast, legs this good, why does she even use a cane normally? After running about half a kilometer, Chris Hemsworth didn't feel particularly tired. Eric Church, on the other hand, was gasping for breath, his face back at the spirit medium still pursuing relentlessly. This old woman was truly terrifying. After running this long, he felt like his lungs were about to explode, yet she still showed no sign of strain. If she hadn't slowed down, he would have been utterly despairing by now. Hey, bro, doesn't this road feel kinda familiar? As Eric Church pulled his gaze away, he finally noticed something wrong. While adjusting his breathing, Chris Hemsworth replied. Of course it does. This road leads to Phuong Thon Hall. The moment he heard that familiar place name, Eric Church's eyes lit up. I get it now, bro, that's brilliant. You're leading her there on purpose. Chris Hemsworth raised the book in his hand. These things matter too much to her. She won't let go. The two continued to fine-tune their pace. In the midst of the chase, they drew closer and closer to Phuong Thon Hall. The tall platform had already pierced through gaps in the forest, coming into view. Just then, Eric Church, who finally felt salvation was within reach, turned his head to look at the spirit medium once more. And that single glance froze the smile on his face. Chapter 43, Kai Vu Village, the skin-wrapped female ghost. Glancing back for just a moment, Eric Church suddenly realized. The spirit medium, who had been running on two legs, now looked like a wild beast. Her upper body was pressed low to the ground, hands and feet moving together as she charged forward, like a starving wolf chasing its prey in a frenzy. Damn it, did she just evolve? Eric Church shrieked, his heart, only just beginning to relax, tightening violently once more. They watched as the spirit medium, who had clearly slowed down before, suddenly accelerated again the instant her arms touched the ground, moving even faster than at the start. The skeletal structures of humans and animals are fundamentally different. This alone determines that most people simply cannot run on all fours like animals. Beyond balance, the more critical issue is strength and flexibility. Human arms generally aren't capable of supporting repeated impact and rapid shock absorption. Trying it once might be fine. Sustaining it for long periods would almost certainly destroy the arms. Yet the spirit medium behind them now seemed to have truly transformed into a savage beast. Her movements were grotesque and twisted, but her speed was terrifyingly fast. In just a few seconds, the distance between them shrank by dozens of meters. Now, the spirit medium was less than 20 meters away from Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church. This is bad, bro, she's catching up. After running for so long, Eric Church felt like his lungs were being crushed. He couldn't breathe, his head spun violently, only sheer survival instinct had carried him this far. Even so, his body was already at its limit. No matter how badly he wanted to accelerate, his strength simply wouldn't respond. At this rate, the spirit medium would catch him in less than 5 seconds. Hall would take at least 20 more seconds. The gap closed, closer, closer. The spirit medium's hideous, ferocious face rapidly filled his vision. Her features were nearly distorted, her eyes bloodshot and blazing, devoid of any trace of humanity. Eric Church squeezed his body like a wrung-out sponge, forcing out the very last remnants of strength, but his legs refused to obey, unwilling to move any faster. At last, the distance between the spirit medium and Eric Church crossed the threshold between life and death. Seeing her pounce toward him like a demon, Eric Church was consumed by despair. At that moment, a single thought echoed in his mind. If I survive this blood gate, I swear I'll train my long-distance running properly. Here, take it. Isn't this what you want? Eric Church was slammed to the ground by the spirit medium. Just as the bone blade in her hand was about to fall, Chris Hemsworth's voice rang out, bringing her to an abrupt halt. She slowly raised her head, her bloodshot eyes locking onto the book in Chris Hemsworth's hand. The next instant, she saw Chris Hemsworth suddenly hurl the book away. That direction. Straight toward Phuong Thon Hall. The spirit medium let out a scream of rage and terror. She actually released Eric Church, turning instantly to chase the falling book, snatching it just before it could plunge into the waters of Phuong Thon Hall. The moment she grasped the book, she almost immediately returned to her human form. Hunched over once more, she stood atop the high platform, her back to the water, glaring down at Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church with murderous intent. The game is over, vermin. Her voice was icy cold, her lips stretched into a brilliant, triumphant smile. What a pity. In the end, I still won. In fact, I have never lost. Pulled Eric Church up from the ground and, step by step, led him to the edge of Phuong Thon Hall. Just like that, they stood beneath the high platform, looking straight up at the spirit medium. Yes, he said with a smile. The game is over. Seeing the smile on Chris Hemsworth's face, the spirit medium's expression stiffened. An overwhelming sense of dread surged in her heart. At that very moment, bubbling sounds suddenly rose from behind Phuong Thon Hall. Glug, glug. It was as if the entire body of water were beginning to boil. The spirit medium heard the sound, and her body began to tremble uncontrollably. She lowered her head, staring at the bluish stone slabs beneath her feet. Absolute terror filled her eyes. How did I come here? Earlier, in her desperation to retrieve the book from Chris Hemsworth, she had been forced to enter that state. And in that state, her rationality had been severely suppressed. She tried to retreat from the platform, but clusters of black algae suddenly stirred, crawling up her body and binding her tightly. No, no. The spirit medium screamed in terror, frantically hacking at the black algae with the bone blade in her hand. The bone blade was indeed terrifyingly sharp, capable of slicing through the indestructible hair of a female ghost. But there were simply too many tendrils of black algae. No matter how much she cut, new ones grew back instantly. In the end, even the spirit medium's arms were completely immobilized. Glug. Glug. The bubbling grew louder and louder behind her. Soon, the two men below saw it. A sheet of human female skin slowly surfaced from the water, standing silently behind the spirit medium. The skin-wrapped woman reached out gently. The fingers gripping the bone blade loosened at once, the weapon falling and clattering onto the stone steps before the two men. Jivich. The spirit medium cried out in pain, but black algae surged up again, sealing her mouth shut. Picked up the bone blade and carefully wiped it clean. Before long, blood streamed from the corners of her eyes, and a mournful, sobbing sound escaped her lips. Tugu. Tugu. At her soft calls, the bone blade seemed to come alive, trembling continuously, as if responding to her voice. The spirit medium still struggled. She truly had some skill. While the skin-wrapped woman was focused on cleaning the blade, the spirit medium tore through the woman's hair with one hand. Then, her withered fingers seized the strands covering her mouth, clawing madly. Very quickly, that mass of hair was ripped apart. The spirit medium began muttering strange incantations. As the chants echoed, the skin-wrapped woman let out a pained groan. The hair binding the spirit medium suddenly burst into flames, and in moments, vanished into nothingness. Below the platform, both men were utterly horrified. Holy hell, this old woman is that strong? Eric Church screamed hoarsely. His eyes flickered darkly. Seeing that the spirit medium was about to break free, he suddenly grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it with all his strength. By sheer luck, or cruel fate, the small stone flew straight into the spirit medium's mouth, lodging firmly in her throat. Her eyes bulged. She clutched her neck, coughing violently. Just as she finally swallowed the stone, thick black hair swept in again from behind. And this time, the female ghost gave her no chance at all. Chapter 44, Kai Vu Village, The Truth, Part 1. The spirit medium's entire body was engulfed by dense black hair. The strands tightened, again and again, wrapping ever more viciously around her. From within the mass of hair came her shrill, agonized screams. A. The sound made the scalps of the two men below prickle violently. Before long, it no longer even resembled a human voice. Fresh blood seeped through the gaps in the black hair, spilling across the blue stone tiles of the high platform, then dripping steadily downward. Crack, crack. The horrifying sound of bones breaking rang out without pause, stabbing directly into their eardrums. They stared at the human shape bound by black hair, watching it shrink, smaller and smaller, until finally, it became a lump of flesh. That mass was less than half the spirit medium's original size. Witnessing this, both men felt an overwhelming urge to turn and flee. This skin-wrapped female ghost was truly terrifying. The spirit medium's scream ceased, yet the thick stench of blood still hung in the air, mingled with the ghost's low, sobbing cries. Chris Hemsworth did not leave immediately, not because he wasn't afraid, but because the female ghost still held something critically important in her hands. The book taken from the spirit medium's bedroom. Only by obtaining that book could they safely enter the mountains, and only then could they save Alice Englert, who was not yet dead. Chris Hemsworth had always valued his companions. If Alice Englert had dared to risk entering their second blood gate, leading them through the mission together, then he could not simply abandon her when she was in danger. Watching the skin-wrapped female ghost sobbing softly, Chris Hemsworth stepped forward, gritting his teeth as he spoke. The person you wanted, we brought her to you. Your revenge is complete now. Can you return that book to us? I need it, to save my friend. Clutching the bone blade, slowly lifted her horrifying face at his words. Two streams of bloody tears ran down from the corners of her eyes. The eyeballs dangling on the stretched skin stared straight at Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church. Sensing something was wrong, Eric Church hurriedly tugged at Chris Hemsworth's sleeve and whispered. Damn it, bro, the way she's looking at us feels off. We should leave, now. We'll find another way to deal with Alice. The spirit medium's dead. We can go back to her place and search it thoroughly, there might be more clues. If we die here, Alice is dead for sure. The moment he finished speaking, the skin-wrapped female ghost, who had been sobbing in place, appeared right in front of them. Though it wasn't their first time seeing her, facing the female ghost at such close range made their hearts pound wildly, their entire bodies going rigid. A terrifying chill radiated from the ghost's gaze, seeping into every corner of their bodies. Above them, the sun blazed brightly in the sky, yet they felt not the slightest warmth. Could it be that this skin-wrapped female ghost intended to repay kindness with hatred, and kill them as well? The thought had barely formed when even Chris Hemsworth couldn't suppress a shudder. Fortunately, after scrutinizing them for 2 or 3 minutes, the female ghost slowly extended her hand and returned the soaked book to Chris Hemsworth. Then, she raised her hands to the eyeballs hanging on her facial skin. With 2 wet pop sounds, the skin-wrapped female ghost tore out her own eyes and handed them to the 2 men. Staring at the eyeballs resting on the pale palm, Chris Hemsworth swallowed hard, then clenched his teeth and accepted them. Clearly, the skin-wrapped female ghost did not intend to harm them. Otherwise, they would already be dead. And if she didn't mean to harm them, then these eyeballs must serve some other purpose. To Eric Church. The instant they both accepted them, their vision blurred violently. And when they came to, the skin-wrapped female ghost was gone. The black algae carpeting the ground began to wither at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, they crumbled into dust. A thought stirred in Chris Hemsworth's heart. He slowly stepped onto the high platform of Phuong Thon Hall, watching as the woman's skin in the water gradually decomposed, finally turning into a pool of sludge that sank to the bottom of the lake. "Bro, how is it?" Eric Church asked from below the platform, looking up. Chris Hemsworth shook his head. "Nothing. She has left." Eric Church naturally understood what "left" meant. He let out a long sigh of relief, leaned against a nearby tree, closed his eyes, and rested. This female ghost knew how to distinguish gratitude from hatred. "When I was young, before my master passed away, he once told me that sometimes humans are more terrifying than ghosts. Back then, I thought it was just a joke. But after growing up and wandering the world alone, I realized. He was right." The two of them recalled everything they had experienced in this village. It really was true. Those who truly wanted to kill them were never the ghosts, but the villagers themselves. Chris Hemsworth suddenly laughed. How ironic. He flipped open the book in his hands and examined it closely. The smile on his face slowly faded. Noticing the change, Eric Church hurriedly asked. "Bro, what's wrong?" Chris Hemsworth let out a sigh, steadied his emotions, and handed the book over. "See for yourself." After skimming the recorded truth of what had happened back then, Eric Church's eyes burned red. His fists clenched tightly. Damn it, the Nguyen family bastards. After doing so many vile things, how the hell are they still alive? The two finally learned everything that had transpired in the village over the past 100 years. It turned out that more than a century ago, the village truly had suffered a devastating drought, followed by famine. At that time, however, the Neum Tu family was the wealthiest in the village. They repeatedly opened their granaries, distributing grain to save the villagers. Because of this, the villagers' loyalties gradually shifted toward the Neum Tu family. This was terrible news for Nguyen Kai Hong, who was preparing to compete for the next term as village chief. Yet he had no choice. In an era where people could starve to death at any moment, even he had to rely on the charity of the Neum Tu family to survive. But good times never last. After half a year of opening the granaries, even a family as wealthy as the Neum Tus was running out of food. Looking at his wife, children, and elderly relatives, Neum Tu was forced, heartbroken, to make a decision. They would stop distributing grain. That single decision gave Nguyen Kai Hong, who had long harbored sinister intentions, a perfect opportunity. In truth, Nguyen Kai Hong didn't need to do much to incite the crowd. Most people in this world are inclined to remember grievances and forget kindness. When Neum Tu stood before his home, facing a sea of villagers, and told them that his family no longer had surplus grain to give, the way they looked at him had changed. It was the gaze of wolves. Chapter 45, Kai Vu Village, The Truth, Part 2. By the time everyone realized they had been deceived by Nguyen Kai Hong, it was already far too late. They had become the most ruthless executioners in the village. Their hands were soaked in blood, blood that could never be washed away. No one dared to collect Neum Tu's body. He lay in his own courtyard, his body mangled beyond recognition by hoes, sickles, and all kinds of farm tools. Blood and scraps of flesh were scattered across the ground. His eye sockets were sunken, with only one eye left, staring up at the sky in stunned disbelief. In that gaze, beyond terror, there was only confusion. He truly did not understand. Why was it that, after he had poured almost his entire fortune into saving the villagers, they still chose to kill him in the end? Naturally, no one could explain why, on the very night Neum Tu died, the drought in the village came to an end. A torrential rain poured down from the heavens. This life-saving rain was something the villagers had long prayed for. They cheered, cried, shouted to the skies. They forgot the crime they had just committed, forgot everything they had done to the man who once saved their lives. Niam too was dead, and the drought was over. At some point, rumors began spreading through the village, claiming that Niam too had secretly committed immoral deeds behind everyone's backs. On the surface, he had built the Yenvu temple to worship the gods, but in truth, he had used it to hoard grain and wealth, thus angering the deities and bringing about the drought. Of course, these rumors were spread by Nguyen Kai Hong. He needed this method to quickly destroy Niam too's influence over the villagers. In the end, he succeeded. The villagers seemed to truly believe him, and he finally achieved his goal of becoming the village chief. Nguyen Kai Hong burned Niam Shuyan, Niam too's son, alive inside Yenvu temple. Then he secretly abducted Chu Nam Nok, Niam too's wife, and took her for himself. Chu Nam Nok had been beautiful since childhood. Even after giving birth, her looks and figure barely changed. Combined with her gentle, submissive demeanor as a wife, she naturally became a renowned beauty throughout the region. Nguyen Kai Hong, on the other hand, was different. He was born ugly. Not only were his features unpleasant, but his teeth were crooked as well. When his parents were still alive, they constantly worried that he would never find a wife and searched everywhere on his behalf. But when the girls saw Nguyen Kai Hong, they either shook their heads and left immediately, or reluctantly agreed, only for Nguyen Kai Hong himself to look down on them. And so time passed, until even his parents gave up. After Niam too died, Nguyen Kai Hong was drawn to the sight of Chu Nam Nok clutching Niam too's corpse, wailing in grief in the courtyard. For several nights afterward, he tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The beautiful face of Chu Nam Nok filled his thoughts again and again. Unable to withstand the torment of his desire, Nguyen Kai Hong devised a cruel deception, claiming that heaven was enraged, summoning lightning to burn down Yenvu temple, killing Chu Nam Nok and Niam Shuyan inside. In reality, only Niam Shuyan was burned to death. Chu Nam Nok was secretly abducted by him and hidden in the cellar beneath his home. Over the following months, Chu Nam Nok endured indescribable torture and abuse. No matter what Nguyen Kai Hong said, she refused to submit. Every time she saw him, she cursed him, until she was violated and tormented into unconsciousness. Nguyen Kai Hong felt it was all meaningless, or perhaps he had vented enough of his rage on her. When Chu Nam Nok cursed him viciously once more, Nguyen Kai Hong finally erupted. All the fury and repression he had bottled up for so long exploded at once. He cut off Chu Nam Nok's tongue, rendering her mute. He casually used ashes to stop the bleeding. His mind twisted beyond imagination, Nguyen Kai Hong devised a new form of torture for her. He had someone specially build a small water pool for Chu Nam Nok, then summoned the most skilled butcher in the village. First, they pierced her hands and feet with chains to restrain her movement. Then, little by little, they shaved her bones alive. Watching the exquisite face of Chu Nam Nok contort in unbearable agony, unable to make a single sound, Nguyen Kai Hong laughed in delight. He experienced a satisfaction he had never known before. Thus, Chu Nam Nok's body was soaked in icy water as more than half of her bones were shaved away alive, until she finally died from blood loss. But the punishment did not end with her death. Nguyen Kai Hong ordered the butcher to finish the remaining work, to skin Chu Nam Nok while she was still alive. Gazing at the pool filled with bright red blood, Nguyen Kai Hong tossed the butcher a gold ingot and turned away. About half a month later, while searching for a new wife, Nguyen Kai Hong accidentally learned that the butcher who had helped him skin and debone Chu Nam Nok was dead. Dead in an extremely horrific manner. At first, Nguyen Kai Hong believed it was merely an accident. But as he continued to suffer nightmares night after night, and strange incidents began occurring throughout the village, he finally realized. They were in serious trouble. The dead had become vengeful spirits, returning for revenge. People in the village began to be brutal. Their eyes bulged almost out of their sockets, blood vessels bursting everywhere. Their faces were frozen in unimaginable terror, as if they had seen something utterly horrifying just before they died. As the number of deaths grew, a strange and oppressive atmosphere gradually enveloped the village. Nguyen Kai Hong knew that if this continued, sooner or later it would be his turn. But he was unwilling to give up the power and reverence he had worked so hard to obtain. In the end, Nguyen Kai Hong spent a large sum of money to send a villager to a famous temple dozens of miles away, seeking help from the monks. Naturally, the monks refused the money. A young monk named Phap Tuesday followed the villager back to Kai Vu village. The moment he arrived, he said a single sentence to the villagers. "The resentment of the dead is far too great, it cannot be easily resolved. Either the villagers leave, or everyone will die here." Who among the villagers dared to hesitate upon hearing this? They immediately brought the young monk to see the village chief, Nguyen Kai Hong. "Master, is there truly no other way?" Nguyen Kai Hong wore a sorrowful expression, endlessly recounting his hardships to the monk. He told him that the Nguyen family had served as village chiefs for generations, that his ancestors had entrusted the position to him, and that he absolutely could not allow the village to be overrun by evil spirits. Simply too convincing, or perhaps the young monk truly did not understand the depths of human malice, but he believed Nguyen Kai Hong. He was moved by Nguyen Kai Hong's supposed willingness to sacrifice himself for the sake of the villagers. Raising his voice, he chanted a Buddhist invocation. "Amitabha, if I do not enter hell, who will?" Then the monk told Nguyen Kai Hong that, aside from dispelling the resentment of the vengeful spirit, there was another way to protect the village's peace. That method was to sever the monk's head, preserve it using a special technique, then place his body together with the body of the vengeful spirit as they were in life, build a temple to worship them, and invite monks to chant scriptures for 7 days and 7 nights. After death, he would be able to borrow the power of Buddhist Dharma to suppress the evil spirit. However, this method had one extremely important prerequisite. The monk's head must not be separated from his body. Chapter 46, Kai Vu Village, The Truth, Part 3. Once his head was separated from his body, all of his power would completely vanish, and the evil spirit would re-emerge. Back then, Nguyen Kai Hong remembered this point with absolute clarity. That was why, until the day he died, he forbade anyone from approaching that temple, and the monk's head was never allowed to leave his body. That period was likely the rarest stretch of peace the village had ever known. However, that peace ended when Nguyen Kai Hong's son took over as village chief. He lacked authority and could keenly sense the villagers' distrust toward him. Many people in the village actually knew what his father had done all those years ago, because they themselves had taken part in it. Yet out of fear of Nguyen Kai Hong's methods, coupled with guilt and an inability to face the past, no one dared to bring it up again. After Nguyen Kai Hong died, his son, Nguyen Ham, assumed the position of village chief, and that was when the true nightmare of Kai Vu village began. To suppress the villagers and secure his own power, Nguyen Ham personally went to the temple on the mountain behind the village and took the monk's head away. This time, strange events returned to the village once more. After a series of deaths, Nguyen Ham finally realized that he had unleashed a terrible disaster. Terrified, he tried to return the monk's head. But when he went back to the temple, something horrifying happened. Nguyen Ham discovered that the monk's body, which should have been seated inside the temple, had disappeared. This time, he was utterly panicked. At first, Nguyen Ham had only wanted to use this as a way to retaliate against the villagers, to make them feel fear, to remind them that it was his father who had once brought everything would spiral completely out of control. In a panic, Nguyen Ham immediately sought out a villager, imitating his father's old ways. He gave the man money and told him to go to the temple to seek help. But this time, it failed. After decades without incense or worship, the monks of that temple had either died or left. When the villager arrived, he found that it had become nothing more than an abandoned ruin. The villager returned to Kai Vu village in despair. The horrifying events continued to unfold, and in the end, driven to desperation, the villagers prepared for the worst, ready to abandon the land where they had been born and raised. No one wants to leave their homeland unless there is truly no other choice. Especially when they have no money. It was at this moment that a turning point appeared. A woman arrived in the village. She first asked about the situation there. After understanding everything, she told Nguyen that she could resolve the village's problems free of charge, on one condition. Nguyen had to marry her. Naturally, Nguyen did not know her true motives. But at that point, what choice did he have left? He did not want to relinquish his power, so he could only agree, hoping that this woman truly possessed the ability she claimed. What he never expected was that not long after marrying her, the village actually returned to peace. But that joy was short-lived. Less than 2 years later, the woman died. She died from complications during childbirth. However, the child miraculously survived. It was a baby girl. That girl was the spirit medium. From a young age, she was exceptionally intelligent, constantly studying the relics her mother had left behind. From her father's words, she learned the full details of what had happened back then. Nguyen died of heart disease, and the spirit medium took his place. By then, she had already gained considerable prestige within the village. Yet after assuming power, she was even worse than her father. Not only did she spread rumors and slander about the dead, she also forced villagers to hand over property and grain to build various temples. In reality, most of that wealth flowed straight into her own pockets. Even so, villagers still occasionally died under mysterious circumstances. Noticing that the village population was steadily shrinking, the spirit medium knew this could not continue. So she devised a solution. That solution was, to let outsiders replace villagers as sacrifices. In this way, the resentment of the unjustly dead could be temporarily appeased. From that year onward, the village began aggressively developing tourism. They poured enormous effort and resources into building attractions, and at the same time opened the village to tourists during the annual periods when sacrifices were required. It had to be said, the method worked extremely well. Ever since tourism began to flourish, no one in the village died anymore. Of course, they did not call those outside visitors people. They called them sacrifices. That was the entire truth of Kai Vu village. These people are nothing but beasts. From top to bottom, not a single one of them is good. Eric Church cursed, his eyes red. Still not satisfied, he rushed forward and kicked the spirit medium's lump of flesh hard, smashing it into scattered chunks of meat surged into the air. Feeling sick, the two of them decided to take the book and leave. This method is not only cruel, it's also courting disaster. Chris Hemsworth sighed. Think about it, when the number of unjust deaths keeps increasing, the resentment will only grow stronger. One day, when it can no longer be suppressed, it will turn back on these villagers. Do you remember what Sister Alice said? That spirit medium had already begun to suffer backlash. Eric Church recalled the red-dressed female ghost they had encountered after the first blood gate, and a chill ran through him. No wonder such a terrifying monster had been born. Slaughtering an entire villa complex wasn't enough, it still sought other places to continue killing. The red-dressed female ghost we met after the first blood gate was probably formed from the combined resentment of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of people from Kai Vu village over the past century. No wonder it was so vicious, wiping out everyone in that villa. Damn it, knowing what these people have done, I don't even want to save them. Chris Hemsworth said quietly. We never intended to save them in the first place. Right now, we need to find a way to save Sister Alice first, and then help the monk recover his head. I suspect that only the monk can suppress the resentment of Niam Tu and all those who died unjustly, but without his head, even he is powerless now. Chapter 47, Kai Vu Village, Ascending the Mountain. By the time they returned to the guesthouse, dusk had already fallen. The two of them ate a quick, careless meal and saw that the three-person group led by the man with glasses was also there. Every one of them looked exhausted, their bodies dotted with wounds. Judging by appearances, their injuries were not too serious. But when the man with glasses saw Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church return without Alice Englert, his expression immediately darkened. After all, they had risked their lives to draw the spirit medium away, nearly getting themselves killed, yet in the end, they had gained nothing. Disappointment was only natural. Did you not find Sister Alice? Irma, the timid girl in the group, asked shakily. Chris Hemsworth fell silent for a moment. We found her, but her condition is extremely bad right now. Also, the spirit medium is dead. That's the good news. When they heard that the spirit medium was dead, everyone's expressions eased slightly. After all, the one who wanted them dead in this village was the spirit medium. That's great. The man with glasses clenched his fist tightly. With the spirit medium dead, we're safe now. Standing by the window and looking outside, Eric Church suddenly let out a cold laugh. Safe? You're dreaming. Mocked like that, the man with glasses froze and stammered. That's not right. The ones who wanted to kill us were the spirit medium and the villagers. Now that the spirit medium is dead, the villagers are like snakes without a head. Of course we're much safer. Chris Hemsworth spoke up calmly. Then think about this. Why did the spirit medium and the villagers want to offer us as sacrifices to the dead in the first place? Then, as if something clicked, sweat immediately beaded on his forehead. That's right. Although the spirit medium and the villagers of Kai Vu wanted them dead, why would they attack outsiders unless they had no other choice? At the root of it all, their true threat had always been the dead of this village. This book records a safe way to go up the mountain. We'll split into 2 groups. Your group will look for the monk's skull, while my group will search for Alice Englert's body. As Chris Hemsworth finished speaking, he glanced at the third person in the man with glasses group. That man spoke up. Is it really necessary to waste so much time and effort to save her? I mean, she's already been beheaded. There's no logical reason she could still be alive. At the very least, shouldn't we consider that possibility? What if we go through all that trouble to bring her body out, and she still dies? Wouldn't that make everything we did meaningless? He was a man who rarely spoke at all. Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church could barely even remember his name. His words caused everyone's expressions to change. Yes, what he said was cruel. Abandoning a teammate, especially one who had contributed so much. Guilt rose quietly in everyone's heart. But this was no longer the moment when they had first entered the blood gate. They had witnessed too much horror, come too close to death. Under such crushing survival pressure, all they wanted now was to find a way out and leave this blood gate as quickly as possible. As for remorse and regret, that could wait until they survived. You can say that so calmly right now because someone else already took the risk for you. I hope that when you're the one in danger, you'll be just as calm watching your teammates abandon you and walk away. Eric Church said coldly. The man replied indifferently. But I'm not the one in danger right now. Eric Church flew into a rage and stood up to strike him, but Chris Hemsworth grabbed him and stopped him. I've already told you the way up the mountain. What happens next is your own problem. No one owes anyone anything. The man with glasses nodded. All right. Either way, thank you for lending us the book. We'll do our best to find the skull. As they stood up to leave, the nameless man turned back toward Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church, sneering. 2 idiots. With that, they turned around and left without another glance. Eric Church slammed his fist down hard on the table. Bang! That bastard. We shouldn't have told him what was in the book at all. Chris Hemsworth said calmly. Whether they want to or not, they still have to help us. If the skull isn't found, all of us are in danger. Get ready. Now's the right time to head up the mountain. We have to make it back before dark and return Sister Alice's body. Eric Church nodded. They quickly prepared ropes and backpacks, checked their equipment, then passed through the forest toward the foot of the mountain. This was their first time here. Everything matched the book's description. The entire area behind the mountain was shrouded in a faint red mist. The moment they stepped onto the mountain's base, Eric Church shuddered. Damn it, why is it so cold here? He muttered, his anxious gaze sweeping the surroundings. Chris Hemsworth also felt the temperature plummet abruptly as they approached the rear of the mountain. The mountain was unnaturally silent. So silent it felt wrong. A long stone-paved path twisted upward toward the summit. They both looked up, but their view was blocked by the pale red mist. They couldn't see what lay above. Only an indescribable sense of unease filled them. As if behind that red fog, something was coldly watching them. Now that they had come this far, neither of them had any intention of turning back. They stepped onto the stone stairs, preparing to move forward. And at that very moment, something unexpected happened. As their feet touched the stone steps, a horrifying scene unfolded. The originally clean stone path suddenly burst forth with fresh blood. The thick stench of blood rushed straight into their noses. They looked up again, only to see the dim sky swallowed by dense fog. That blood was flowing from somewhere within the pale red mist at the end of the stone path. What was even more terrifying was that when they finally focused their eyes, the stone path was already covered with countless corpses, strewn everywhere. Chapter 48, Kai Vu Village, Searching for the Body. Damn it, bro, what the hell is going on? Beside him, the bearded Eric Church was frightened into swearing again. He first pinched his thigh hard, then carefully lifted his foot and sniffed the sole of his shoe. Ugh! The thick, rancid stench of blood rushed into his nose, making him nearly vomit on the spot. Damn it, is this an illusion? Chris Hemsworth stared at the stream of blood that kept flowing down the stone steps, shaking his head with a grim expression. I'm afraid this is the mountain's true face. What we saw before was probably nothing more than an illusion concealed by the power of a ghost. The bearded man followed Chris Hemsworth upward step by step, terror plainly visible in his eyes. Be careful. Don't step on those corpses. Stay as far away from them as you can. Scattered across the stone steps were headless corpses. While searching among them, Chris Hemsworth merely gave them a cursory glance and moved on. All of these corpses were male. Fuck, that damn the spirit medium, just how many people has she killed? From the foot of the mountain to halfway up, they had already seen dozens of corpses. These bodies weren't killed by ghosts, Chris Hemsworth suddenly said. Eric Church asked beside him. How do you know, bro? Chris Hemsworth pointed at the severed neck of a corpse by the roadside. Look closely. Do you see that black slime? Eric Church looked carefully, there really was. Although all the corpses had been beheaded, the cuts on their necks were extremely clean. There wasn't much blood, instead the wounds were covered by a layer of black liquid. In fact, the wounds had already healed. This isn't. Seeing this, Eric Church immediately thought of the human heads preserved in glass jars in the ruined room of the spirit medium's exactly the same, thickly coated in that black substance. The most horrifying thing was that those beheaded people were not dead. What is she trying to do? Eric Church's legs began to tremble. Luckily, he had brought a stick to use as a cane, or he wouldn't have been able to stand steadily on the slick stone steps. Chris Hemsworth pondered for a moment, as if realizing something. Do you remember what Sister Alice told us? She said the spirit medium's body had developed problems because of the backlash from resentful spirits. When we first met her, I smelled decay on her body. Her neck was covered in dense red blotches, it looked like it had already begun to rot. I'm thinking, could it be that she wants to use some kind of bizarre forbidden technique to replace her body with a new one? Although the ancient book found in the spirit medium's room contained no such record, Chris Hemsworth's speculation made Eric Church inhale sharply. He had also seen those red blotches on the spirit medium's neck. At first glance, they looked like bloodstains left behind after being severed. Chris Hemsworth's guess was very likely the truth. Hang in there. Once we find Sister Alice's body, everything will become clear. Suppressing the fear and revulsion in their hearts, the two finally reached the mountaintop. Fortunately, the headless corpses along the way did not rise as undead, nor did they cause any trouble. They simply lay motionless in pools of blood. The sight was terrifying, but they posed no real threat. Beyond the stone steps was a dense forest. At its center stood a temple choked with vines and weeds. The blood flowing endlessly down the steps was coming from the walls and tiles of this temple. Inside the temple were also many headless corpses. The difference was that these bodies were strung up with ropes, hanging from the ceiling like slabs of dried meat, swaying gently as if far fresher than those on the stone steps. Clearly, the spirit medium had made them not long ago. By their clothing, Chris Hemsworth quickly found Alice Englert's body. Everything had gone more smoothly than expected, yet an unease gnawed at his heart. To take the body down and confirm its condition, Chris Hemsworth had Eric Church step outside while he slowly pulled down the corpse's trousers. On the pale left buttock, there was indeed a birthmark shaped like a dagger. Chris Hemsworth pulled Alice Englert's trousers back up, then together with Eric Church tied her body securely with rope. They weren't doing this out of any twisted habit, it was because they feared that, on the way down the mountain, Alice Englert's body might suddenly move for some unknown reason, obstructing them or even threatening their lives. After finishing this, Chris Hemsworth had Eric Church carry Alice Englert's body over his shoulder, while he himself walked around the temple, observing his surroundings, grew stronger and stronger. Something's wrong, this isn't right. Chris Hemsworth forced himself to calm down, his eyes constantly scanning the area. He felt that something was off, yet no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't pinpoint what. This feeling had appeared while he was searching for Alice Englert's body. So what exactly was wrong? At that moment, Chris Hemsworth's gaze swept past a corpse in the corner of the wall. That single glance made his soul nearly leave his body. He finally understood what was wrong. That corpse had a head. Not only that, it looked as if its entire body had been smashed apart, flesh mangled and stuck together in a horrifying mess. And now, it lay in the corner of the temple, staring straight at the two of them with an exaggerated, bizarre smile. "Run!" Chris Hemsworth didn't say another word, he shouted at Eric Church behind him. But the moment they turned around, the temple doors slammed shut with a bang. Sunlight from outside was completely cut off, plunging the entire temple into pitch-black darkness. Standing in the dark, both of them felt their bodies freeze like ice, utterly unable to move. And behind them, came the sound of terrifying footsteps. Tap. Thud thud. Thud. Chapter 49, Kai Vu Village, Escape. Hearing those footsteps, the two men standing in the darkness felt as if their souls were about to freeze solid. "Bro, what do we do now?" Eric Church's voice trembled violently. His mind felt completely empty. Chris Hemsworth didn't answer him. He only gripped the bronze mirror that Alice Englert had given him. If there was anything left that could save their lives now, it could only be this bronze mirror. Back at the dried well, he had witnessed its power with his own eyes. With just a slight reflection from the mirror, Alice Englert had dispersed all the resentful spirits at the bottom of the well. Of course, Chris Hemsworth also knew that the vengeful ghost inside the temple could not be compared to those things in the well. This thing must be Niam too, its resentment is far too strong. The footsteps behind them drew closer and closer, like they were stepping on the men's chests, each step threatening to crush their hearts. Thump. Tap. Thump. Fear fermented endlessly with every sound. Chris Hemsworth clenched the bronze mirror tightly, his palms slick with sweat. Finally, the footsteps stopped right behind him. Then came a long, drawn-out silence. Waiting for judgment in such darkness was unbearable. Even someone as mentally steady as Chris Hemsworth felt cold sweat pouring from every pore of his body. He knew it, the terrifying thing was right behind him, staring straight at him. He desperately wanted to turn around, but he couldn't move. The blood jade on his chest radiated intense heat, as if it were burning into his flesh. Chris Hemsworth didn't know how terrifying the ghost behind him was, to make the blood jade heat up to such a degree, as though it were about to melt. Hungry. The sound was like bubbles rising from deep in a throat, bleak, weak, hoarse, yet sharp as needles stabbing into their eardrums. Chris Hemsworth's vision went black, and he nearly fainted. At the same time, something cold and sharp pressed against his back. It cut into the skin on his back, sending a jolt of pain through him. And it was at this moment that the bronze mirror, dormant in his palm, awakened. Woo, woo. In the darkness, the sound of a woman sobbing echoed. The moment that sound rang out, the two men, already chilled, felt a bone-piercing cold. They shuddered violently and suddenly realized they could move again. Beard, push the door, now. Chris Hemsworth practically roared. Eric Church knew very well that the female ghost couldn't hold it off for long. Adrenaline surged through him as he sprinted forward and smashed into the temple doors with all his strength. Light flooded in from outside. The two men, who had been on the verge of suffocating, finally gulped down fresh air. Without looking back, they dashed out of the temple and ran toward the foot of the mountain. Before descending, Chris Hemsworth glanced back. He saw the bride-clad female ghost standing in front of Neum 2, her red silhouette fading at a speed visible to the naked eye. Neum 2 remained where it was, as if blocked by her. Yet on its horrifying, cracked face, its blood-red eyes were fixed on the two men fleeing downhill. The malice in that gaze was almost overflowing. Faster! Chris Hemsworth shouted. Running ahead while carrying Alice Englert's body, Eric Church heard the urging and pushed himself to go even faster. He gasped with his mouth wide open, not daring to look back, running with everything he had. Behind him, Chris Hemsworth suddenly heard something crack in his hand. He looked down and saw that the bronze mirror had shattered into pieces. Ghost within the mirror vanished at that same moment. His heart sank straight to the abyss. He had thought the item might still be usable a second time, but now it seemed its durability had reached its limit. If Neum 2 chased after them now, they would surely die. With that thought, Chris Hemsworth turned his head again. Just one glance made his heart seize. On the mountaintop behind them, Neum 2 had already left the temple, standing on the blood-soaked stone steps, coldly staring at the two of them. Its legs did not move at all, yet with every second that passed, its body appeared on the next step down. This speed was not slow. The two men, afraid of falling, couldn't run too fast down the mountain. Each step took them at least 2 seconds. Eric Church, faster. It's catching up. Chris Hemsworth yelled. Running in front, Eric Church cried out in despair. This is as fast as I can go, bro, I can't run anymore. Chris Hemsworth accelerated and reached out, taking Alice Englert's body from Eric Church's shoulder. Although Alice Englert wasn't heavy, and missing a head, she weighed only a little over 100 G. For an ordinary person to flee while carrying such a burden was impossible for long. Fortunately, Chris Hemsworth was physically strong. Carrying Alice Englert's body, he ran far more easily than Eric Church. Since the distance from the mountain to the foot wasn't far, they quickly rushed down the stone steps. They didn't dare look back or stop, plunging straight into the forest. Ahead, 3 figures suddenly appeared. Chris Hemsworth looked up. It was the bespectacled man and his companions. Run! Even so, Chris Hemsworth didn't understand what was happening. Seeing Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church charging toward them like madmen courting death, they were momentarily stunned. What was going on? Before they could react, Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church had already run past them. Run! Chris Hemsworth shouted again without turning back. This time, everyone ran. On one hand, herd mentality amplified the fear in their hearts. On the other, they had seen Neum 2, its body riddled with cracks, bloody, mangled flesh spilling out, as if it might shatter at any moment. Damn it! The bespectacled man cursed under his breath, but still followed after Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church. Because they were running behind, they seemed to draw Neum 2's hatred. Neum 2 stopped chasing Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church and switched its target to them. Fuck you, Chris Hemsworth. The last man shouted toward Chris Hemsworth, his eyes filled with both ferocity and terror. Unlike the others, earlier that morning when they lured the spirit medium, they had been injured in the village, and he had unfortunately hurt his leg. Now, with tension and fear piling on, he couldn't run at all. He could only watch helplessly as the four figures ahead grew farther and farther away. Chapter 50, Kai Vu Village, Reattaching the Head. Save me, save me. I'm still back here. Anna felt the icy breath drawing closer behind him. In sheer terror, he stretched his hand forward, screaming in desperation. But the people ahead were only concerned with fleeing. Who would turn back to look? At that moment, Anna finally understood what Chris Hemsworth had said earlier. He hadn't wanted to risk his life for his teammates. And now, his teammates didn't want to risk theirs for him. He had been abandoned. Anna clenched his teeth, resentment flooding his eyes. Those damned bastards, how dare they abandon him and run off on their own? He had done everything he could for the team, and they still treated him like this. What right did they have? Damn it, at the critical moment, not a single one of them can be trusted. He cursed inwardly, yet he didn't dare slow down for even a second. Despite his injured leg, he forced himself to limp forward. But after running for a while, Anna suddenly felt something was wrong. As if, his body was getting lighter. The sensation came abruptly, and once it appeared, it never went away. He kept trying to run, but his body grew lighter and lighter, until finally, like a feather, it had no weight at all. Anna could no longer feel his body. In terror, he looked forward, eyes wide, as if seeing something unimaginably horrifying. A headless corpse, wearing the exact same clothes as him, was staggering forward. After running a short distance, the corpse collapsed to the ground, completely motionless. Hungry. Beside his ear came that terrifying bubbling sound. This wasn't a sound a normal human could make. It was more like an old, long-neglected machine suddenly grinding back to life, the bizarre noise of rusted gears scraping against one another. A blood-soaked hand grabbed Anna by the hair, slowly turning his face around. Anna saw what the thing chasing him truly looked like. He opened his mouth in extreme terror, but no sound came out. Faster, the sun's about to set. Chris Hemsworth panted heavily. Carrying Alice Englert's body for so long was taking its toll even on him. But he didn't dare stop. The sun was sinking lower and lower. The afterglow of dusk was tilting toward the horizon. He had to reach the spirit medium's manor as quickly as possible and reunite Alice Englert's body with her head. Beard, open the door, now. Chris Hemsworth shouted. Eric Church immediately sprinted forward, kicked the spirit medium's main gate open, then ran to the corner of the courtyard. Outside the unnoticed small room, he jammed a steel wire into the lock and worked it open. Fortunately, his skills were truly solid. Even without seeing anything, relying only on sound and touch, he quickly picked the lock. Chris Hemsworth rushed into the corner and immediately took out the transparent glass jar containing Alice Englert's head. He spoke to her. Sister Alice, we brought your body back. What do we do now? Inside the clear jar, Alice Englert's beautiful face looked unusually stiff, her eyes gradually empty. Compared to earlier in the day, she now resembled a lifeless statue. Seeing her condition was wrong, Chris Hemsworth hurriedly slapped the glass jar hard, calling her name loudly several times. Alice. Alice. Can you hear me? Perhaps the blows worked. Inside the jar, Alice Englert's rigid eyes finally moved slowly. She stared at Chris Hemsworth outside, and after a long pause, spoke in an extremely weak voice. You came back. Chris Hemsworth glanced at the sunset about to vanish, panting as he shouted to her. We brought your body back. What do we do now? Break the glass. Put my head on the body. Crash. The moment she finished speaking, Chris Hemsworth smashed the glass jar hard against the ground. The fragile container shattered instantly, liquid splashing everywhere, while Alice Englert's head was lifted into Chris Hemsworth's hands. Without a moment's hesitation, he and Eric Church hurriedly placed Alice Englert's head back onto her body. At once, the cut at the neck of the head and the cut on the body touched, and fused together. On Alice Englert's slender neck, only a faint red mark remained, as if it had merely been lightly constricted by a rope. In the final instant of twilight, lying in Chris Hemsworth's arms, she finally opened her eyes. Those watery eyes trembled slightly at first, like a drop falling into a still lake, rippling the surface. Then, light and vitality gradually returned to them. With a soft groan from Alice Englert, the two men finally relaxed, knowing she was alive. "Fuck, you scared me to death. Sister Alice, we thought you weren't going to make it." Seeing Alice Englert finally wake up, Eric Church wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, gasping for breath. Alice Englert thanked them softly and gently propped herself up from Chris Hemsworth's arms that had already fallen and said with a bitter smile, "This blood gate really is dangerous. I thought I was being extremely careful, but I still almost died." As she spoke, her gaze turned to the two of them, filled with an unspoken gratitude. People willing to risk their lives to save others like this were truly rare in Ghost Dwelling. Of course, besides gratitude, she also felt an inexplicable trace of embarrassment toward Chris Hemsworth. She knew that in the mountain temple, Chris Hemsworth had pulled down her trousers and seen her buttocks. Naturally, people who frequently walked the line between life and death didn't care about such things as much as ordinary people, so she quickly regained her usual composure. "Where are the others?" Alice Englert asked. "Almost all dead. If nothing unexpected happened, there should be 5 left now." Mentioning the number of survivors, Eric Church's expression darkened. There had been 14 of them when they entered. In just 5 short days, fewer than half remained. And now, only the final 2 days were left. If in those 2 days they still couldn't help the monk retrieve his skull, then they would have to face Niam too, transformed into a vengeful ghost, along with every resentful spirit that had died here over the past 100 years.